welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're jumping into one of history's really pivotal periods, the Renaissance, roughly 1300 to 1600.
Right, a time of incredible transformation.
Exactly. And our mission today, for you listening, is to kind of unpack why it was truly a rebirth, not just some passing fancy. And the most surprising thing right off the bat, it's this massive philosophical shift. Think about it. They went from memento mori, remember you must die.
Which was very medieval, focused on the afterlife.
Totally. To carpe diem, seize the day. Suddenly, the focus is right here on Earth, on human life, and what you can do.
And that name, Renaissance, it literally means rebirth in French. A rebirth of classical culture, so Greek and Roman antiquity.
Okay, so why then? Why Italy?
Well, a lot of it boils down to money. Actually, you had these booming northern Italian cities.
Yeah.
Florence, Venice, Milan. Super wealthy merchants and bankers.
Right.
And they wanted to show off that wealth. Plus, they felt this connection to the old Roman Empire was their history rediscovered.
So they found old stuff.
Basically, yeah. Rediscovering ancient texts was key. A lot of this knowledge came back through trade, especially contacts with the Arab world. They'd preserved huge amounts of Greek and Roman writing.
Which leads to humanism, right? I hear that term a lot.
Exactly. And it wasn't just, reading old books for fun. It was this idea of putting man at the center. The belief that humans could learn, achieve amazing things, solve problems, all based on studying that classical culture, trusting human reason.
Okay, but that sounds a bit academic. How did these ideas actually spread beyond a few rich guys in Italy?
Well, that's where technology comes in, the printing press. Around 1450, this invention was a game changer.
Right.
Suddenly, you could copy these texts, these new humanist ideas, incredibly quickly and relatively cheaply. It just exploded across Europe. It wasn't just for the elite anymore.
Okay, before we dig into how all this changed, like art and science,
Yeah.
a quick moment. If you're finding this deep dive useful, maybe learning something new, please do show some support.
Yeah, it really helps us keep doing this.
Just take a second to like this session, subscribe if you haven't, and maybe drop a comment below what's one insight that stood out to you so far. We'd love to hear it. Okay, so humanism, printing press, ideas are spreading. How did this rebirth, this focus on humanity, actually look different in art, architecture?
Oh, the change was dramatic, visually immediate. Compare a typical medieval statue, often quite stiff, symbolic, to someone like Michelangelo.
Totally different feel, much more realistic.
Exactly. Realism, proportion, copying those classical Greek and Roman forms. At architecture, same thing. Columns, arches, domes. Think of that massive, incredible dome Brunelleschi built in Florence.
A direct nod to ancient Rome.
Absolutely. And crucially, art wasn't just about religion anymore. Wealthy families like the Medici in Florence became huge patrons. They commissioned art celebrating, themselves. Human power, worldly things, not just Bible scenes.
And this wasn't just about looks, right? This new way of observing the world hit science, too, starting with the human body itself.
Yes, definitely. Take medicine.
Yeah.
For centuries, everyone relied on Galenus, an ancient Roman doctor. But the thing is, he'd mostly dissected animals, apes, pigs.
He's not people.
No. Then comes Andreas Vesalius in the 1500s. He insists on dissecting actual human corpses. He makes these incredibly detailed, accurate drawings.
And finds errors.
Loads of them. He basically proved Galenus was wrong on many, many points because human anatomy is different. It was revolutionary, trusting direct observation over ancient authority.
Wow. Okay, so if the ancients were wrong about our own bodies,
Yeah.
what about the heavens? Astronomy.
Exactly the same question being spared. The old model from Aristotle and Ptolemy was geocentric. Earth at the center, everything revolves around us.
Made sense intuitively, I guess.
It did, but then Copernicus comes along and says, hang on, what if the sun is at the center? The heliocentric model.
Which was
Hugely. And then Kepler refined it, showing planets move in ellipses, not perfect circles. And later, of course, you get Galileo confirming these ideas with his telescope, leading to that famous conflict with the church. It all stemmed from that same impulse. Observe, question, rethink.
So, wrapping this up, what's the big takeaway for you listening? All our sources really point to the Renaissance as, the start of modern times. It was a transition, wasn't it?
Definitely a transition, full of new discoveries, this amazing intellectual freedom. But, and this is key, it was all sparked by looking back to antiquity. A paradox, really.
Yeah, using the old to build the new.
Precisely.
Okay, final thought to leave you with.
Well, think about that humanist drive for original texts. Scholars like Erasmus, they want to get back to the original Greek scriptures of the Bible, not just rely on later Latin
To
translations.
purify the church, right?
Yeah,
Reform it.
that was the idea. But this intense focus on the source, on textual accuracy, driven by humanism, it created this huge intellectual tension. And that very tension, that demand for the original word, it arguably helped pave the way for something even bigger, the Protestant Reformation.
Wow. So the seeds of the next major upheaval were sown right there in the Renaissance method. Fascinating.
Let's dive in. The 14th and 15th centuries, this era just completely reshaped the world, didn't it? This whole period of European expansion.
It really did. An unprecedented global push. And when you look the sources, you see it wasn't just wanderlust. There were some very powerful forces at play.
Right, not just let's see what's out there. What were the main drivers?
Well, three big things jump out. First, those traditional overland trade routes to Asia. They were getting harder to use, more expensive, sometimes blocked entirely.
Okay, so a practical problem. What else?
Second, you've got new technology, better ships, improved navigation tools, stuff that basically made these long, dangerous sea voyages actually feasible, or at least, more survivable.
Made it possible to even think about going further.
Exactly. And third, don't underestimate the religious angle. Christian monarchs had this, powerful ambition to convert other peoples around the world. It was a mission for them.
So combining all that, the big goal became finding new sea routes, direct routes, to what they called Indy.
Precisely. And Indy wasn't just India as we know it today. It was basically this catch-all term for the rich coasts of Asia, full of spices, silks, wealth. Find a way there by sea, bypass the old routes. That was the prize.
And Portugal really led the charge initially, didn't they?
They were the first out of the gate, systematically exploring down the African coast. You always hear about Prince Henry the Navigator.
Right, though he wasn't actually sailing the ships himself.
No, but he was crucial. He financed the voyages, pushed the strategy. Early on, it was partly about fighting Muslim powers in North Africa, but very quickly it also became about trade. Gold supplies for ships.
And they set up those factorages. Tell us a bit more about those.
Yeah, the factored-ins. Think of them as fortified trading posts, usually a warehouse, some housing for staff, maybe a small fort for protection. Relatively small footprint initially.
So not full-blown colonies at this stage.
Not really, more like strategic commercial hubs along the coast. Places to trade gold, ivory, and tragically, increasingly enslaved Africans, and also vital spots for ships to resupply on the long journey south.
It was a slow push down Africa then.
Methodical, yeah.
Step by step.
Then the big breakthrough. 1488, Bartolome Diaz makes it around the southern tip. He apparently called it the Storm Cape.
Can't blame him.
Right. But the Portuguese king, John II, he saw the potential immediately, renamed it the Cape of Good Hope. Good hope of reaching Asia.
Clever PR move. And did it pay off?
Took another 10 years, but yes. 1498, Vasco da Gama finally reaches Calicut in India. That was huge. Suddenly, they had direct sea access to the pepper trade, challenging the established Arab merchants.
But it wasn't smooth sailing from there, was it? I remember reading his first trip wasn't that profitable.
No, the initial haul was disappointing. It seemed the local rulers weren't just going to roll out the red carpet for Portuguese traders, so da Gama came back a few years later.
And this time, he wasn't asking nicely.
Definitely not. He returned with an armed fleet, about 20 ships, bombarded Calicut, used force to secure a cargo of pepper, spices, jewels. It set a precedent.
A much more aggressive approach.
And it worked, in their terms. By the mid-1500s, Portugal had something like 50 of these factorages dotted all the way from West Africa to Japan. They were trading Asian goods back to Europe, but also, importantly, trading between different parts of Asia, a massive network.
This is fascinating stuff. And if you at home are finding this look at how global trade and power dynamics shifted useful, maybe take a second now to hit like, subscribe, and perhaps leave us a comment. Let us know what other historical turning points you'd like us to tackle.
So, while Portugal was building this maritime network eastwards, Spain took a different tack, didn't they?
Right, they went west, starting, famously, with Christopher Columbus in 1492.
And Columbus, of course, sailed west convinced he'd find Indy. He landed in the Caribbean, but thought he was in the East Indies right up until the end, didn't he?
He did. It took others, like Amerigo Vespucci, writing about it being a truly new world for that reality to sink in. Hence, America.
And Spain's strategy there was fundamentally different from Portugal's factoragen. They weren't just setting up trading posts.
No, Spain went for full colonization. Conquest. Think of the conquistadores, literally Conquerors.
Like Hernan Cortez taking down the Aztec Empire in Mexico, or Francisco Pizarro defeating the Incas in Peru. Their primary goal: gold, silver, huge amounts of it.
And the conquests themselves. Incredibly violent.
Brutal. The Spanish had steel weapons, swords, some firearms, which the indigenous populations lacked. But honestly, the biggest factor, the most devastating, European diseases.
Smallpox, measles, influenza.
Exactly. Things the indigenous populations had no immunity to. The death tolls were catastrophic, far exceeding deaths in battle. It effectively cleared the way for Spanish control over vast territories.
So after conquest, how did Spain manage these huge new lands?
They set up colonial governments, ruled directly from Spain. Critically, they relied heavily on forced indigenous labor duangerbide, often justified, or at least moderated on paper, by efforts to convert people to Christianity.
And they did find the wealth they were looking for.
Oh, yes, especially silver. The discovery of the massive silver mine at Potosi in modern Bolivia was a game changer. Huge quantities of silver were shipped back to Spain regularly on the so-called Silver Fleet.
Which became a famous target for pirates, right?
Absolutely. A very tempting target sailing across the Atlantic.
So looking back at this whole era, the consequences were just immense, weren't they? Truly world-changing.
Completely. You've got the world map literally redrawn. Europeans circumnavigated the globe. Christianity spread massively. A global economy starts to form, with the Dutch, French, and English eventually jumping in too.
But also the violent destruction of ancient, powerful empires like the Aztecs and Incas, and the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade forcing millions of Africans to the Americas. It's a really mixed and often tragic legacy.
Definitely. And it leaves us with a thought, perhaps for you listening. European impact was swift and overwhelming in the Americas. But in Asia, initially, it was much more limited, despite Portugal's network.
So the question is,
how did those two starting strategies, Portugal's coastal factorage versus Spain's land colonization and conquest, how did that initial difference shape everything that came after? The global power struggles, the empires, it all kind of stems from those early choices, doesn't it? Something to think about.
So if you think about Western Europe before the 16th century, it's hard to overstate the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. It was just everything, wasn't it? Religiously, politically, culturally.
Absolutely. It was the central pillar of society. But then came this period we call the Reformation, this massive upheaval.
Right, a huge split. And that's what we're diving into today, using your sources to understand how this religious renewal also became, well, a pretty violent redrawing of power.
Exactly. Our mission here is to get past just listing dates and names. We want to understand why. Why did all this discontent, which had been simmering for a long time.
You mean with people like the Cathars or Wycliffe, Johannes Hus?
Precisely. Why did it suddenly just explode in the 1500s? Why then? It turned into, well, a full-blown revolution, leading to new movements like Lutheranism and Calvinism.
And your sources point to some pretty immediate triggers, right? A lot of visible corruption.
Oh, definitely. There was huge public frustration. You had church leaders seemingly obsessed with, worldly things, power, pleasure, commissioning incredibly expensive art.
While ordinary people were often struggling.
Exactly. And add to that stories of poorly trained clergy, high-ranking ones, even ignoring vows like celibacy. It created an environment just ripe for change.
Okay, so let's bring in Martin Luther. His challenge seems to have struck right at the core, theologically speaking.
It really did. He went after the fundamental Catholic teaching that salvation wasn't just about faith, but also required the church's active help, the sacraments, doing good works. The church positioned itself as the essential middleman.
So what was Luther's big idea then? The one that kind of broke everything open? After studying the Bible, what did he land on?
It boils down to solidified. Through faith alone.
Faith alone. Just 3 words, but they changed everything.
Fundamentally, if salvation, being justified before God, comes only through faith, through complete trust, well, then the whole traditional structure starts to look shaky.
So things like monasteries, praying to saints, pilgrimages, even the need for priests as intermediaries.
Exactly. Suddenly, their necessity is questioned. And this wasn't just abstract theology, it had huge practical consequences. If faith is personal, direct.
Then you need to be able to read the Bible for yourself.
Precisely. It couldn't stay locked up in Latin. It had to be in the common language. That's why Luther's German Bible translation in 1534 was such a revolutionary act. And services needed to be simpler in plainer churches.
But the real flashpoint, the thing that really set it off, was about money, wasn't it? The indulgences.
Ah, yes, the Affelhandel, the sale of indulgences, the idea that you could pay the church to reduce the punishment for sins, even for relatives already dead.
Which, for Luther, completely contradicted sola fide.
Absolutely. It looked like buying your way into heaven. So his famous protest in 1517, nailing the 95 Theses to the church door that was directly targeting this practice.
And the church's reaction?
They pushed back hard. Luther was excommunicated in 1521, but it was already bigger than just Luther by then. The political dimension was crucial.
Right, you mentioned German princes getting involved.
Yes. Some German rulers saw this as a perfect chance. They could support Luther, challenge the Pope's influence in their lands, and maybe, just maybe, stop paying all those church taxes that flowed to Rome. It gave Luther vital protection.
So a theological dispute becomes a major political power play. Fascinating. Now, as we dig deeper into this period, maybe take a moment yourself to think about how these ideas started to spread and what questions you might have about this huge shift. Because Luther wasn't the only major figure stirring things up.
No, indeed. We absolutely have to talk about John Calvin. His influence was enormous, particularly in places like the Netherlands.
And he took things even further theologically, didn't he?
He did. Calvin developed the doctrine of predestination. This is the idea that God has already decided before you're even born who is destined for salvation, the elect, and who isn't.
Wow, that's quite a concept. Very deterministic. How did that belief actually play out in people's daily lives? If it's already decided, what's the point?
Well, paradoxically, it led to incredible discipline and organization. Since you couldn't know for sure if you were saved, the thinking went the best evidence that you might be one of the elect was to live a highly moral, sober, thrifty, and hardworking life.
Almost like you had to prove it to yourself in the community.
Sort of, yes. It fostered these very focused, productive communities. Some argue it laid the groundwork for what people later called the Protestant work ethic. Calvinist communities tended to be very tightly organized, perhaps more so than the early Lutherans.
So you have these spreading movements, conflict inevitably follows. How did they try to manage that politically?
The first major attempt was the Peace of Augsburg in 1555. This basically established the rule, cuius regio, is religio, whose realm, his religion.
Meaning the local prince or ruler decided if their territory would be Catholic or Lutheran.
That's right. And everyone living there had to follow suit or leave. It was a way to stop the fighting, at least in the German lands. Later in France, you had the Edict of Nantes in 1598, which granted substantial rights to Calvinists, the Huguenots, offering a bit more tolerance, for a time anyway.
Okay, so Protestantism is spreading, gaining political recognition. How did the Catholic Church respond to losing so much ground?
They launched what's called the Counter-Reformation, or Contra-Reformity. It wasn't just damage control, it was a major strategic effort on multiple fronts.
Like what? What do they actually do?
Well, they used tools like the Inquisition, strengthening it to investigate and prosecute perceived heresy. They created an index of forbidden books to control the spread of Protestant ideas.
So, clamping down on dissent.
Yeah.
But did they also look inward?
Yes. Critically, they did. They realized they needed to reform from within. This meant much stricter rules for clergy, better education in seminaries, tackling corruption, trying to restore moral authority.
And wasn't there also an artistic strategy?
Oh, very much so. The rise of Baroque art is strongly linked to the Counter-Reformation. Think spectacular, dramatic, emotional biblical scenes in churches, huge canvases, sculptures full of movement.
A deliberate contrast to the simplicity the Protestants favored.
Exactly. It was designed to inspire awe, to overwhelm the senses, to draw people back to the Catholic faith through powerful visual and emotional experiences, not just intellectual argument.
So looking back at the end result of all this, it's a profound shift. The Catholic Church undeniably lost a huge amount of influence, both spiritual and temporal.
Immense change. And the daily lives of ordinary people across Europe were transformed. The focus shifted, for many, from community rituals led by priests to more individual piety, personal Bible reading. Old Catholic feast days and customs were often replaced or disappeared.
It's quite incredible that just a couple of core theological ideas, sola fide and predestination, could unleash forces that literally reshaped nations and the very fabric of society.
It truly is. Which leads to a final thought, perhaps for you listening.
Yeah.
If these abstract beliefs, held deeply by individuals, had such power to redraw maps and change social behavior back in the 16th century, how much do our own deeply held beliefs, individual or collective, still fundamentally shape our political landscapes and social structures today? It's a question that never really goes away. Back. Today, we're tackling a revolution that almost wasn't meant to be. Think about it. A powerful emperor tries to unify his lands.
And ends up accidentally creating one of Europe's first modern republics, just through sheer resistance.
Exactly. We're diving into the Dutch Revolt, de Nederlands Opstand, our mission, to unpack how political pressure, religious strife, and determined rebels forged the Dutch Republic.
Right, the Republic der Zeven Verenigde Nederlanden. And it really kicks off with the ambitions of Emperor Karel V. He ruled until 1555.
Huge empire,
Yeah.
17 different provinces in the Low Countries alone. His big idea was centralization, make it all run from the top down.
And he wasn't subtle. In 1531, he sets up these three central councils, the Collateral Raten, you had the Council of State for Policy, the Privy Council, basically for implementing laws, and the Council of Finance, handling money.
So efficiency was the goal, I guess. But the result sounds like immediate friction. Did people see it as good governance or just tyranny?
Definitely leaned towards tyranny for many. I mean, these new councils directly trampled on local privileges, the old rights noblemen in cities held dear. It felt like a direct attack.
Okay, so that's the political powder keg. What about the fuse?
Religion. That was the second major pressure point, especially with the blood plakat, the blood edict in 1550.
Right, that mandated Catholicism, no exceptions.
Exactly. Being anything else, being a so-called heretic, essentially became a capital offense. Prosecution ramped up significantly. You can imagine the tension building.
And this really shifts gears, doesn't it? From political wrestling to outright religious persecution when Karel steps down in 1555?
It does. His son, Philip II, takes over. And Philip was, well, even more rigid. He continued prosecuting non-Catholics relentlessly, no compromise.
Which brings us to a really pivotal year, 1566. What happens then?
Well, the nobility tries one last diplomatic push. They present the Smeekschrift, the petition of the nobles, asking for moderation.
And the response?
Famously dismissive. A court official supposedly told the regent, Margaret of Parma, "N'ayez pas peur, madame. Ce ne sont que des gueux. Don't be afraid, madam. They're just beggars."
Wow. Gueux. Beggars. And that name stuck, right? The rebels became the Gueusen.
They embraced it. But that dismissal fueled the fire. Almost immediately after, you get the Beelden Storm, the iconoclastic fury.
That started August 10th, 1566.
Yeah, after a Hagenpreek, an open-air sermon near Steenvoorde, things spiraled, and people started storming churches, destroying statues, religious images. It spread like wildfire.
Okay, so that's open defiance. Spain's reaction must have been harsh.
Brutal is the word. And actually, if you're finding this deep dive useful, maybe take a quick second now to subscribe, perhaps like it, and definitely leave a comment. Let us know what you think about this turning point or suggest other topics. We really do want to hear from you.
Please do. So Spain's response, Philip II sends in the Duke of Alva.
Correct. In 1567, Alva establishes the Raad van Beroorten, the Council of Troubles, often called the Council of Blood.
For good reason, I imagine.
Thousands were executed. It was a reign of terror. Many fled, including the key figure, Willem van Orange, William of Orange. But they didn't give up. They organized resistance from outside.
And how did that resistance gain ground again?
The turning point was April 1st, 1572. The Waterguzen, the Sea Beggars, managed to capture the port town of Den Briel.
A small victory, but symbolic.
Hugely symbolic. It sparked other cities in Holland and Zeeland to join the revolt, proclaiming Willem van Orange as their leader, their stadtholder. The rebellion was truly back on.
But the path to becoming a republic wasn't straightforward, was it? There were more twists.
Oh, definitely. Willem initially aimed for unity, trying to keep all 17 provinces together. But then Spain hits a crisis of its own.
The bankruptcy in 1575.
Exactly. Spain couldn't pay its soldiers in the Low Countries, and those unpaid troops went on a rampage. The Spanish Fury, sacking cities like Antwerp.
Horrific. Did that chaos force some kind of unity?
Temporarily. It led to the pacification of Ghent in 1576. For a moment, almost all the provinces united against the mutinying Spanish troops.
Yeah.
But the religious divide was just too deep.
Holland and Zeeland were firmly Calvinist by then.
Right. While the southern provinces remained largely Catholic and wary of Calvinist dominance, that temporary unity fractured pretty quickly.
Leading to the split in 1579.
Precisely. You get the Union of Arras in the south, making peace with Spain, and the Union of Utrecht in the north, binding those provinces together to continue the fight against Spain. That northern union is the real kernel of the future Dutch Republic.
And then comes a truly radical step.
The Plakat van Verlutting in 1581, the Act of Abjuration. This is huge. The northern provinces formally declare that Philip II is deposed. They basically say, you failed to protect us, you acted like a tyrant, so you're no longer our king.
That's incredibly bold for the time, a declaration of independence, effectively.
It really is, though finding a new sovereign proved difficult. But the cost was immense. Philandon Orange, the figurehead, was outlawed by Philip.
And assassinated in 1584. A devastating blow.
It was. Yet the momentum was there. And crucially, Spain's failed attempt to invade England with the Armada in 1588 weakened its position.
So 1588 is the moment.
It's the year the northern provinces, unable to find a suitable foreign monarch, decide to just rule themselves. They declare sovereignty, becoming the Republic of the Seven United Netherlands. It wasn't really planned independence from the start.
More like stumbled into.
Sort of, yeah. It emerged from this 50-year collision of centralizing ambition, religious intolerance, and just incredibly stubborn, determined resistance led by figures like Orange. The final peace treaty, the Peace of Munster, wouldn't come until 1648, but the Republic was effectively born in 1588.
So pulling back, the core takeaway seems to be this clash between centralized power trying to impose uniformity and regional identities demanding their rights and freedoms.
Absolutely. From those councils in 1531 right through to 1588, it's that fundamental tension playing out.
Which leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? How much of our modern ideas about national identity, about resisting authoritarian control, whether it's political or religious, how much of that is still shaped by struggles like the Dutch Revolt? Something for you to mull over.